Businesses have warned that South Africa's economy cannot afford stricter lockdown measures. This as COVID-19 infections continue to increase in South Africa, prompting fears of, well, yet another hard lockdown. Let's discuss this further. We're joined by Tshivhengwa, Chief Executive Officer, Tourism Business Council of South Africa. Mhlekazi, welcome to SA Today. Thank you indeed for joining us. We've come full circle. Last year was heavy for the tourism sector. Can we even afford what we are discussing right now?
Well, thank you for having me. You are quite correct. We came a long way. And last year, this time around, we were all in our houses, hoping that, the COVID-19 is going to somehow go away, or we're going to go back to some level of normalcy. And as we speak now, we are still, way behind as a tourism industry in terms of recovery. So any restriction that may come, will not advance, the recovery of the tourism sector. So no, we are not ready for any restrictions. We shouldn't have any restrictions. And I think that we should be able to manage the challenges of COVID, using the non-pharmaceutical intervention as we've done in the past. So we cannot afford any restrictions at the moment. We barely have recovered, and we're barely scratching the surface. Yes, there has been domestic tourism happening, from the domestic leisure side of things. But in terms of, the full scope of domestic tourism, including government travel, corporate travel, meetings, incentives, conferences, and exhibition, including international travel, has not been happening. So we only have one aspect of travel that's happening, which is domestic leisure travel. And we cannot sustain the industry by using only domestic leisure travel. So we're way off, and we still need a whole lot more to be done for us to even begin to, touch, maybe 20% of recovery.
What have we learned through the past hard lockdown and the restrictions? What has the tourism sector learned and picked up and said, look, we were there, we are now prepared, better prepared, if we can put it that way, having picked up, the issues that you had to deal with during the hard lockdown to make business continue if something like this happens again?
Well, we did learn that, many people who want to travel, want to feel safe. And that's why we produce the protocols that we use across the value chain of tourism. But I think what we need to do and what we need to have learned as a country is that, COVID-19 may not be a short-term challenge. It may be a long-term challenge that requires us to think in a long-term measured, kind of a way. Because if we don't do so, we're going to always, when we have a wave, we're going to go back to our houses, lock ourselves in, put restrictions out there, limit movement of people, then we're going to come out, then we go back to work. And then the same thing is going to happen over and over again. So I think that we ought to think of this as a long-term challenge that requires us to have a long-term solutions and build the new normal. And I think, as a society, we should have learned that, non-pharmaceutical intervention that includes wearing of a mask, social distancing, sanitizing hands or washing hands, they do work. And we should not be complacent, because if we are complacent, we have the situation that we have now. But we cannot go back to using the instruments that we used last year, because those instruments, as we've seen, made a lot of people unemployed. And it made lots of businesses close. So we don't want a situation where we're going to have people unemployed and businesses closed, because we're going to need, a relief. And government may not have enough money in its coffers to have a relief for the industry such as ours.
Stats that says foreign arrivals in South Africa dropped about 71% as a sector. It must be tough. It cut deep to what you guys do in the tourism sector.
No, absolutely. There's hardly any international travel or any meaningful international travel happening at the moment. Yes, there are movement of people, up and down, be it business people that are from here going to various countries. And we should also remember that South Africa is on the red list, of many countries, whereby they are discouraging their citizens to traveling to South Africa. So that's why you're seeing the international travel. The numbers are horrific. In fact, if you go and look at the companies that operate, buses or minibuses that carry tourists, they will tell you that they've been parked since last year. So it's been more than 14 months, and their vehicles have been parked. So there isn't any meaningful international tourists that's happening. Yes, there are people that are moving between Zimbabwe, Lesotho, Swaziland, Mozambique, Namibia, Botswana, moving into South Africa, for other different purposes than tourism per se, although they do touch the value chain of tourism. But in terms of international, travel, there's hardly anything going on. We do know what's going on in the UK, being one of our largest source markets. They're discouraging their citizens from traveling to South Africa, same as the USA and same as many other countries. In fact, we as South Africans, we can hardly travel to any country outside of the African continent at the moment, because when you arrive there, from the experience that have been shared by many of our colleagues that have, traveled, is that they look at you as if you're an alien, as if you're bringing something to them. So we've got to work on that, and we've got to make sure that, we advocate, for the removal of South Africa from the, red list, and the removal of these travel advisories that really hinders the growth of tourism in South Africa. So we still have a long way, to go, and we do hope that, the partnership between the private sector, government in its entirety, together with, the businesses within the value chain of tourism, if we can partner to make sure that we get this country to be removed, because some of these restrictions are a little bit unfair, when you look at them, because, yes, we do have a variant of concern, as many other countries have said, but our numbers, suggest something that's different. So we ought to discuss that, and we have to make sure that, we position ourselves correctly as a country.
You make a valid, an interesting point when you speak about the continent, the African continent, that we do get visitors from, neighboring countries. Wouldn't that not be a market, maybe tourism in South Africa could say, look, for now, let's forget the international markets. Let's go deeper into, up north to our brothers and sisters on the African continent. Maybe that's a market we can tap into because, there's no hard lockdown restrictions or red tape on them coming to South Africa.
Yes, it has been a market, but we should also, keep in mind that majority of the people that travel into South Africa from our neighboring countries are traveling for economic reasons. They're either coming here to work, or they're either coming here to shop for, basic necessity to take to their own countries. So not many of them do come to South Africa for tourism purposes, although if you look, at, some of the major holidays, including Christmas, there are people who travel for holidays into our coastal area, and they do enjoy our hospitality. However, majority of people who travel in and out of the country, be it from Lesotho, Swaziland, Mozambique, Zimbabwe, and others, they're traveling for economic reason, and majority of them are economic migrants. So we need to keep that in mind, that as much as there are people that are moving, they are traveling, but they are not necessarily touching the entire value chain of tourism. They may be touching one or two, as part of the value chain of tourism. So we can target those countries, but we need to keep in mind that if they're traveling here for economic reason, it simply means that they may not have enough jobs in those countries and enough disposable income for them to come to South Africa, for tourism purposes. But, they are targeted, they do travel. The markets like East Africa, being Kenya, Tanzania, and that region, there are people who come down here. The West Africa market is still a very important market and has a huge potential for those that want to come here for tourism and shopping and so forth and so on. So we do target the continent. However, our immediate neighbors, usually travel for economic reasons.
I think that was my next question. What is the market share, the percentage of the foreign travel to South Africa as compared to your bottom line with international travel, whether it be it the West or the Americas?
Look, if you look at the total pie of the number of people who arrive into the country, of course, those that are coming from the African continent are the majority, and those that come through our land borders are the majority of the travelers into South Africa. If you go outside of the African continent, pre-COVID, you're looking at around 2.6, 2.7 million tourists that come to South Africa. Now, that's a small number if compared to many other countries that get millions and millions of tourists into their own destination. That includes the likes of Thailand. They get lots of tourists, more than what we could even imagine. So we get a lot of people coming from our immediate countries, as I was saying, including Zimbabwe, Lesotho, Swaziland, but they come here for economic reasons or economic migration. But from the pure tourism point of view, it's very few people from Africa that comes to South Africa, to enjoy, the hospitality and the tourism products. And we still have to do lots of work when it comes to that. And we need to do a lot of marketing in convincing a lot of African travelers, to say, well, you can come and shop in South Africa instead of going to Dubai, as an example, or instead of going to Paris. So because there is that market. You go to West Africa, you go to East Africa, people go to either Dubai, they go to Paris, they go to shop, they can come down here to South Africa. So a lot of work needs to be done from that point of view. If you look at the US, our rivals, it's probably 1% of the travelers that go outside of the US. Same as in the UK, same as in China, same as in India, Australia, and so forth and so on. So we still have a lot of work to do outside of the African continent, to really get, a bigger share. And if we get that bigger share of travelers, we can easily create jobs. And tourism creates jobs in urban areas and also in rural areas. So that's why, our strategy for 2030 was that, we were going to create 2 million additional jobs within the value chain of tourism by targeting countries like China, increasing our numbers from 95,000 to at least 1 million, tourists coming into South Africa. So that still has to be worked on. But of course, COVID-19 brought, a different dimension to what we do. But we need to stick to our plan and we need to market ourselves.
Tshivhengwa, Tourism Business Council of South Africa CEO, thank you indeed for joining us, sir. Good conversation.
Thank you.